Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Patak, and for my fourth and final speech, I'm going to be talking about the Mongol people. A little while ago, I had actually done paper on the Mongols, and I found them pretty interesting. So what I'm going to do today is talk about them a little bit, and I'm going to use some posters with photos on them so that everyone can get an idea of what Mongol people look like, who their leaders were, and the area that they conquered. The reason that I chose the Mongols and why I find them so interesting is, first of all, the Mongols conquered a vast amount of land. And for some reason, it's not as well talked about or well known among people as it is about how vast the Roman Empire was. So I found it pretty interesting that for some reason that part of history is just not as, I don't want to say pertinent, but it's not as talked about. So I think that this should be a pretty good topic. First, I'd like to talk about the Mongol people. Mongol people were nomadic people who traveled and were mostly herders. They had very minimal belongings, and they lived off the land. They were expert horse riders and really brought horse riding to other areas where they had actually conquered. Some of the places that they conquered and where they mainly are located, and even some of their ancestral all the way up today, are mostly in Mongolia, China, and Russia. But there are a lot of areas that they conquered in the past that we'll talk about a little later on. So first, I'd like to show everyone a picture of what the Mongol people look like. Here's actually a Mongol family, and you can see the tent-like teepees that they were living in. They were easy to build and easy to take down, which made it easy for them to travel. So having minimal possessions, having things that were broken down easily and traveled easy was a good thing for them. So that is the Mongol family. Another question that I asked and I wondered about is, who exactly was the Mongol leaders? What were their military tactics? How did they actually conquer a lot of the villages that they were going up against? So a famous Mongol, which most people know, and I'm about to show you the photo now, this is a picture of Genghis Khan. And in the 13th century, when the Mongols really started to expand their empire, Genghis Khan was detrimental because of the kind of leader he was. He had very good military tactics. And unfortunately, though, he was also famous for being a very cruel ruler. Some of the things that Genghis Khan did were skin his enemies alive in front of their villages in order to force the enemy villages to be suppressed by fear. He also took enemy prisoners and used them as human shields during war. But one tactic that he did use that was pertinent to a long-lasting empire was that he, like most leaders before and after him, they didn't discriminate when they captured people. And when I say that, I mean that they used the skills that their capturers had, whether it be administrative, financial, farming, and they used that to their benefit to help their empire. So that was an important part. Also, I'm going to show you another photo here. Mongols were expert horse riders, and they were experts with the bow and arrow. So for military tactics purposes, this actually helped the Mongols defeat a lot of their enemies. Empires during that time were using lots of precious metals, in which the Mongols did not have. And so while they're using swords, the Mongols were using bow and arrows, which obviously, you can kill your enemy from a distance, and they're more flexible. And also, part of the military strategy, which was easier for the Mongols to adapt to, is that because they were nomadic people and they were used to moving around a lot and living off the land, it gave them an advantage when they faced their more urban enemies. So people that were used to living in cities and having things provided for them now had to travel further distances to fight these Mongol warriors, but they weren't as adept to living off the land, which made it harder for them. People died People went hungry, they went cold, they didn't know how to live the same way that a nomadic Mongol did. So that's one of the big military tactics that the Mongols actually already had kind of working for them, but was able to use for their enemies. So next I'm going to show you something about the Mongol Empire. Sorry, this is a lot more difficult than I thought it would be. Okay, so as you can see that from this map, that the Mongols had a pretty vast empire. That red portion of the map actually represents how far out the Mongol Empire went. So through the military campaigns, the Mongols were able to successfully conquer many other nations. Some of the dynasties that I read about anyways were the Zai, Jin, Lao, and I may pronounce this wrong, but Khwarezmian. And these were the dynasties that were conquered by the Mongols. And in terms that everyone can understand, and so that you can see, the modern day portion of this map actually represents countries such as China, Iran, Afghanistan, Russia, India, Poland, and Hungary. And these were the areas that the Mongols had spread out from Mongolia to conquer. So they conquered a very vast amount of land. That's it for my speech today. I hope everyone enjoyed it. I look forward to everyone else's, and thank you for listening.